Hey guys, thank you for coming out today. Captain Chris here with,
Dandy O'Daddy.
and a little bit change of program already, huh?
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about it.
We did a lot of work scheduling our guests for the next 3, 4 months, 5 months. I think we got guests out, but the last 2 weeks right off the bat, the round of sickness has been going around.
I know. We got to stop booking shows through flu season.
Oh God, I mean, we were really sick. Each of us were
Yeah.
sick the weeks leading up, and then last week and this week we lost both of our original guests. So we got to do things on the fly.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what it is. We just have to do what we got to do because we want to put out content for you.
And so as we were trying to get together, we couldn't really get anybody this short notice in this week. So, we kind of had a little theme that we have to do something on the fly. Things didn't work out as planned. And how many times during the summer does that happen to us?
All the time, actually.
It's so true. You kind of go in with a plan. You think what you want to do. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, right?
Yeah, definitely. Trial and error. That's what fishing is.
And a lot of it is you either got to go back to old things that you tried, some new data. Hopefully, if you got a good network of people that could call you in on a bite. But some of that's where your experimenting might come into play.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like as a fisherman, depending on how much time you get on the water, like you have I guess your core fishing methods to target certain species. But the fishery changes every single year, so it's what do you do like at certain times? When do you do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember a big change for us up in our area about 6 years ago now. We started getting the pogies invasion, and that changed the game completely.
Definitely.
Completely. I never really targeted fish with pogies often. Maybe opportunity here, an opportunity there. But as far as something every day with big schools of pogies on the outside, that was relatively new. And you had to figure out how to fish that.
Definitely.
You could find things on the internet. You could read books, watch TV. But then it's pertaining to how you do it in your area and the things that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, definitely. We should talk about pogie fishing for a little bit because, in our area in Ipswich Bay, they really weren't coming in. It was like had been quite a few years before they started to come in. And then next thing you know, they were here in droves. And at the time, you could fish with you could fish with treble hooks.
Yeah, you could snag the pogies on your treble hook and then let it sit and snag and drop.
I mean, how awesome was that when you could do it?
It was fun. I think the fun part was the anticipation of knowing that anything's going to eat that pogie is going to be relatively huge.
Yeah. Well, the coolest thing about that was, like, I'll never forget, there was one, it was just a gin clear day. The water was crystal clear and like polarized sunglasses. You could see right into that school and cast out the weighted treble hook and snag a pogie, and like to see the action, like what actually happens when that is going on. It's really incredible because the bass are underneath the school, right? And then the hook gets set into the fish. Now the one fish freaks out because obviously you just put a hook through its back or its side or its face or wherever it ends up. And then the whole entire school just they isolated, just disperse from around it. And then sure enough, Billy the big mouth bass comes up from the bottom, and it's just an easy snack because the fish is definitely like wounded and floundering.
On my boat, we call them donut holes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd see the big clump of school of pogies. And even when you're snagging one, I mean, that kind of spooks the rest of them. And then you got that one piece of struggling bait really sending out the vibrations that the bass will pick up off their lateral lines. It's a visual cue. That one's injured. That's an easy meal. I've been hanging out under the school all day. I think I'm going to go and goggle up that easy meal. But I think what a lot of people didn't realize also, that's happening under the school when you're not snagging them.
Yep.
So we would almost kind of run and gun our pogie schools at times where we would drive around and look for the visual cues that even if we weren't seeing the big bass blowing them up, because that's obviously the go-to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's type one, what you want to see.
Of course.
But then the next thing you want to do is, all right, can you see the holes inside the school, that clear water in the middle of the school? Because that's bass just pushing them around from inside of it.
Yeah, it's like something, it's something amazing to watch. Like, it would be awesome to have a camera, like, or even drone footage to see, because there have been times where even tuna have been going around them too. So it's kind of they push them all around.
Jay Shields, who's been a member on our podcast, and Fallon, who we talk about all the time in here, they actually have drone footage of a giant bluefin circling their school of pogies just in 25 feet of water off of Plum Island.
Wow.
That same day, I got spooled on a fish, on a tuna, and I marked one on my side scan in 9 feet of water.
Wow.
I got to pull it off I think I might have it on my computer. I'll throw it up on the
nice. You
hopefully
got to
we
put
get it
on
right
that on the Humminbird Facebook page with all the screenshots.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I should have done that. They're doing a contest for that right now.
Oh, really? That whale one you have is amazing.
The whale one's cool. I remember when with the pogies, it brings in all kinds of life, not just large stripers, but we've had sharks, we've had plenty of tuna, whales, dolphins, you name it, it's been in there. And I got some really cool shots on my side scan and depth sounder of a humpback just ripping through the pogie schools. And I remember posting up in the Humminbird Facebook page, and one of the guys who's been really detailed in on the side scan noticed a lot of things on my side scan that I didn't even notice, like the whale's tail. He goes, oh, you could tell the direction that it's going because it was like the back view of the tail that I didn't really pick up on, you know? So the detail in those things is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And, yeah, you know, it was funny going back to the fishing of the pogie schools of how we had to adapt it. I remember when they first came in, we were doing a lot of trolling. We'd snag our pogies and we'd troll outside the school. And, you know, just kind of like we would normally troll mackerel. A couple things that we found was when we troll mackerel, a lot of times we'll use like a 2-ounce weight. But the 2-ounce weight wasn't really getting us down to the bottom. We would still catch plenty of fish, unweighted pogies, or a 2-ounce weight just getting it below the surface. But we weren't really getting the one sitting on the bottom like we wanted. And we found that we had to go to even 6 to 8 ounce weights to get it down off the bottom. And that also just kind of allows more spread, right? The problem with trolling around the pogie schools is, first of all, you get that visual aspect. You know, if you got 4 lines in the water and they start blowing up, you know, 200 yards ahead of you, instinct is to kind of just gun it over there
that's
and
where
get
the
there.
fish are. Let's go.
Yeah, and you know, especially on a charter when you get guys seeing that, you kind of want to get in there. So then that kind of morphed to into that snagging and dropping because we were, you know, it was new to us, and we'd snag some fish. We caught a few as we were snagging them, and we're like, oh, let's just leave it there. And that was a technique that, you know, people have been doing south of us forever, you know.
Yep.
And even how that evolved, again, we're going back into trying something new.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well,
And then
I mean,
you just improve upon it.
yeah, exactly. But like as soon as you master it, boom, like that's gone.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. So then you have to think of a new idea.
Yeah, yeah. And we came up with some new ideas, and, you know, we'll get into details in that in a little bit. We're not going to jump the shark here right at the beginning. But just even how that evolved when we were snagging and dropping, you know, we switched over to bait runners. So we'd snag and then put the bait runner on and let a fish run.
Yeah, so like the big thing about it too is like when the hit would come, you know, pogies are a big bait, and they can be a big Menhaden, Bunker. I want to throw those names out there.
Yeah, you
so
southern
you know
people.
Yeah,
Weird names.
But when they come up and the fish come up, you know, the bass are typically over 30 inches that are eating these things, and sometimes it's like a chomp. It's like it takes a few whacks at the thing,
Absolutely,
before it finally goes in. So the bait runner makes it a good. Yeah.
But what we found with the bait runner too is we would get that little hit or the tap, and then it would go away, or we'd gut hook a few, you know, and then the regulations changed where you couldn't keep anything over 35 inches. So we didn't want to be gut hooking these bigger fish. So we just went to our typical spinning reels. We started using Saragossa 6Ks. And I was telling my guys to snag the bait, keep your rod tip high. When you feel that first little tap, drop your rod tip till that line just comes tight, and then it'll pull drag off when it's hooked. You don't even have to really set the hook. I mean, you can, but for the most part, if that drag's running, yanking back on it, you're just going to pull it out of its mouth anyway, because you're already at the maximum amount of pressure if drag's coming off the reel. And going back to that tap, you know, from what I can tell, when I've seen fish, you know, when we're fishing live bait without weight, compared to with weight down deep, and you can actually visually see that fish attacking the bait. What I think's happening, I don't think they're eating it go 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 like that. I think that first one is there, and you see when you fish poppers a lot, they
Yeah.
come up.
They
And
whack it.
I don't think it's necessarily a tail slap. I think they're hitting it with their head, and what they're trying to do is get it turned around so they can come back and eat it head first, and so that way it goes down their gullet. Like think about it: if you ever catch a striper fishing live bait, you never see the bait halfway in its mouth with the head sticking towards you. It's always the tail.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why bait runners for fishing mackerel or conventional reels, you're getting that first little tap isn't a munch munch. It's a hit, turn, go.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I think's happening. And I also think too, we've really shortened our drop backs even fishing mackerel. It kind of started off even with the circle hooks. We're letting it run. This is way back in the day now. We were letting it run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, throwing the lever.
Yeah.
Now
Now
it's
the lever's just locked.
yeah, half the
Yeah.
time, a lot of times I'm fishing it locked and just doing the rod tip thing because I think that first little tap, they're just turning it and putting it in. It's kind of hard.
Well, especially with mackerel though, like having the lock drag and fishing with the circle hooks, I feel like you can lose a lot of fish, but those fish you're losing are like schoolie size because they have to mess around with the fish to actually get it down. The bigger ones, it's just like
100%. The size
Yeah.
of the mackerel makes a big deal.
Yeah.
I know. Like Mike, for instance, fishes his drags locked up quite often.
Yeah.
Even sometimes in different locales. Sometimes depending where you're fishing, in some areas you might let it run. In some areas you might fish it locked up. I have situations like that. And it's really only because for some reason the fish in one particular area that we fish hit differently.
Mhm.
They're quick striker hits. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but sometimes the drag locked up in those situations just produces a better percentage.
Yep.
So go figure,
Yeah, seriously.
And then for me, a lot too, it's a lot of anglers. Some people can figure out, even if I'm fishing bait runners. It's funny. John Parker is a good friend of ours. He'll be here in a couple of weeks. Called me on the phone today, and we had a discussion that turned into this. He fishes bait runners with his clients for bait when he's bait fishing. I fish Seigler SGs, conventional reels. And it always seems like to be a big debate. Bait runners are conventional. They essentially accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? For the life of me personally, I am not good on a bait runner. I miss a lot of fish. And it seems easy, but I felt like one summer I had to use the bait runners because we dropped two overboard in the span of a week of my conventionals. So me, everything needs to match. So I was fishing bait runners for a few weeks until my order came in, and I felt like we lost a lot of fish. I feel like we had a lot of problems on the hookup, but I don't know. That's just me. So I like having the control of the open bail.
Yeah.
Knowing my depth, when to let go, when to tighten up. Whereas a bait runner, it's more stagnant, and you're waiting for the fish to kind of pull. And
Yeah,
tighten.
well,
It's
especially
good.
if you're just dropping it down,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always associated any type of spin, anything with casting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of
Yeah.
like the same way. When you have people come on your boat, you give them conventional rods or spinning rods.
Conventional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone always worried about the backlash. I remember when I got into chartering, that was a big deal. Like, especially with people, they're like, oh, you're going to get backlash. Especially since I switched over to braided line, we don't get a lot of backlash on our conventional
Well, I think
reels.
it's important that you just don't overfill your spool. with
Yeah, I
line.
definitely underspool it.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
don't be afraid to underspool it. At the end of the day, you don't need that much line,
Yeah.
right? And then just the technology today is a lot different too. So, there are setups out there that you can control what is coming out and at the rate of which it's coming out.
Correct. And free spool.
Yeah, when you're in free spool. So it's not backlash isn't a problem. The only time it really can happen is like with bigger conventional stuff and like new
Yeah, thicker
line.
mono.
Yeah, and
Like the tuna reels. You
Exactly.
can get some backlash on that when you're dropping out spreader bars even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially like if new line isn't like wet packed in there nice, it's kind of like, it just does its own thing and it can compress into itself and so less is more, I feel like, with line on a reel.
I agree 100%. And this is great. Let's talk about the differences of bait runners and conventional, why we like them.
Yeah,
Let's
sure,
keep going.
definitely.
Right? So for me here, in my opinion, the advantages of the conventional reel when you're fishing with live bait. Okay, I got control of my depth by my thumb. It's more efficient. I can let go, put it down. Okay, I can reel it up quick. There's no engaging any type of switch. So like, well, I guess there is the lever you got to put up a little bit, but it it's intuitive to keep your, if I'm letting line out and then I want to reel some in, I just move the lever up a little bit, reel it in. But if I get a hit, I can drop that back down and feed it.
Yep.
And we've caught a ton of fish that way. Just getting a bite, slap that lever down, and it will freely go. That situation in a spinning reel with the bait runner, if you get a hit and you miss it, okay, you can't flip that lever down and that line will freely go. It's still stopped. Okay. So now you got to open the bail, free float it out with no tension on the line. That line might tangle up on itself. You might get picked up. You might not feel it. Okay. And then you got that other action of closing that bail. So if you're familiar with like guys down in Florida will pitch baits to sailfish. They're trolling and they'll see a sailfish and they'll pitch a bait back with a conventional reel and feed it and letting them eat it. We do that with stripers all the time. When we're trolling, when we're drifting, you miss a fish, and it's like a bonus bite. I would say like almost 8 times out of 10 if that happens.
Yeah,
you catch them again.
You get something.
How many times have we talked about that?
A lot. That's like fishing fundamentals. I feel like with when you're fishing with anything in any waters and anywhere, like you have to instinctually know that you have to pause to try to get something to come and eat it again.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's like something that gets ingrained into your fishing DNA as you become a fisherman.
Yeah, it's one of those exactly. It's one of those fundamental things now, but it takes a while to get there.
Exactly.
The more you practice, the more you do it. Like, you're probably like, oh shit, I missed a bite. You go to reel, check your bait. I tell my guys, if you miss one, just keep it in free spool, dump a few feet of line out, and just wait a couple seconds. Because if you have bait, a lot of times they'll come back and you'll pick them up.
Yeah.
Especially trolling live bait.
Oh, especially when you're fishing top water.
Yeah, top water, same concept,
just
right?
Let the thing go dead. Yep.
Yeah, and people always have differing opinions on that. Some people, if they miss a fish, they'll speed it up. Some people will leave it flat. I'm a speed up 2 pumps, wait. Yeah, that's what I do. I speed up for a crink or two, then I wait.
Yep, I'm just let it die. Yeah. Typically, it's friggin' awesome.
Yeah, it is usually
and
big
it is
bite.
awesome when you have a still stick in the water and the fish comes up to eat it. It's like, it doesn't really get any better, honestly. That's my favorite bite, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone loves top water. How could you not?
Yeah. But then, all right, so I think about the bait runner, right? And I just think about all the gearing and the bearings and like the lever mechanism and everything that's there. I truly think that the conventional setup is just a little simpler in general. You're more likely to smoke a bait runner than you are to smoke a conventional reel.
Agree 1,000%. And that was actually the crux of my conversation with John earlier today. Because Shimano came out with some new gear. Nothing really particular that we would fish right now that's useful for what we're doing. And he just said, man, I wish they came out with like a tougher bait runner. And I've been fishing Thunder's, their high-end bait runner models for years. And I feel like
6,000, right?
6Ks, yep.
Yeah.
And just always the issues with the lever switch, freezes up. John was saying the same thing with his. He just wished they made a tougher one. He's got both the original bait runner, the bait runner, and the Thunder's. And he said actually the bait runners have lasted longer in terms of the switches, but it's not as smooth. The gearing's not as strong. The drag's not as strong. So, there's a balance there. But there's so many parts that can go wrong. And like I said, I've had clients really fumble even with just throwing that switch up. A lot of times they get a hit and they jerk back on it without flipping the switch, and then that's a tangle. So I don't know. I grew up bait fishing with conventionals, in addition to I think they're easier to fix if something does go wrong.
Yep.
You could I can pull a conventional reel apart in the water and fix it if I have the things that I need, definitely.
Yeah.
With a spinning reel, it's a lot more difficult.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a very good point, though, about the setting of the hook when the bait runner's in action, because it's like if that lever isn't going forward, it's technically in free spool,
Yeah.
And it's just, oh, there goes your fish.
Yeah, and you just get a tangle around around the spool, and it's just
It's probably not fair that we're both pro conventional reel having this conversation, but there's just so many pros to fishing conventional. And too, if you have a high gunnel on your boat, the line's on top of the rod, it's not underneath the rod. I like to use my left arm for the leverage on the rod and crank in with my right. You don't do that with the spinning setup. It's there's just so many differences, and you really, I guess, I don't know. It's you're used to what you're used to, but we're kind of spoiled where we have, I guess, multiple different setups where we could utilize.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a long time. Yeah. We are out there a lot, so we get to go through and separate the wheat from the chaff, find out what works, what we're comfortable with, and put it together. So, even though we're both pro conventional, I mean, there's still things, even with just bait fishing, bait runner versus conventional. Let's talk about, all right, so we've talked about just feeding the fish back, the ability to do that. Okay. Conventionals by nature have a bigger drag surface than a spinning reel.
Yep.
So you have more drag capacity. You have a smoother drag. That line's getting pulled directly off your reel, as opposed with the spinning reel, it's going to go through your roller bearing, which sometimes that's another thing that can go quickly in a spinning reel.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good tip to bring up. Is if you're servicing your reel or any type of lube, you want to make sure that roller bearing is working the way it should.
It should be.
It's an easy thing to overlook. Some people don't even realize it spins.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So,
and then you have friction on the line, and that's not good.
And then with the braid or even mono, that line's going to burn out and chafe.
Yep.
And you're going to lose the fish. So that's another inherent, typical problem with spinning reels. Conventional reels hold much more line. Okay, so I think my Thunderses hold about 150 yards of 30-pound braid, which is plenty. But you start cutting back, you get tangles, you lose a rig or two, and all of a sudden you're down to 80 yards and half a spool. You get to spool that whole thing up again.
Yeah, well, but you think about the line dynamics, right? So you have line on the reel because if you want a lot of line, it's because you're letting out a lot of line, or you have fish that will probably take a lot of line. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're fishing for something like striped bass, it's good to have an adequate amount of line on there, just so you don't have to continue to respool because you're cutting off your leaders, because you're dealing with this or dealing with that. It just gets shorter over time. And why would you want to keep replacing it?
That's the great point too, and I think that's what I was just trying to get at. Is you on a conventional reel, my Seiglers, I have it set up to hold about, I think it's about 250 to 300 yards of 30-pound with half a spool of mono underneath it. So I got plenty of line on those. So if I'm cutting off, even if I cut off 100 yards throughout a couple weeks, it's no big deal. I don't have to respool the whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, especially having the mono backing too, right?
Correct.
And that's there, and if you're replacing just the top of it, then
because I'm not paying for $500 a braid. That gets expensive when you do it on 6 reels.
Yeah, no.
So instead, cut it in half.
The frequency in which you do it too. Like someone that has one setup and only fishes a few times a year, go ahead, spool that thing right up.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly changing out line and changing things, then why not have a cheaper backing? Yeah, because sometimes you don't even get down to it. A lot of the time you don't.
Yep. No, never. Unless sometimes if I'm a little low on backing and we're trolling and, there's days maybe I want to put my bait 100 to 150. Well, let me see. If I go 8 colors, each color is on the line I got is 25 feet, right? That's 200 feet behind the boat, almost a football field.
Yeah.
And then you get a big bass in deep water. That can take you to your backing if you're a little short. So that would be something if I was trolling a spinning rod,
Yeah.
I wouldn't like that. I don't want to fish on my backing. I want my backing hidden.
Yep.
Did I ever tell you the story about the fish that took me to my backing?
No, I don't think so.
It was the biggest striper I've ever seen in my life, kind of.
Well, wait, did you catch the fish?
Let me tell you the story.
If you didn't catch the fish, it's always the biggest one you've ever seen.
I know.
No, all right, so let's hear it.
It was 4th of July, 2011. My first year with my boat. Jay Soroyce, my old roommate, good buddy. You know Jay, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So we went out 4th of July in the morning, just the two of us fishing, real hot day, got some mackerel, trolling the beachfront. Nobody's around. And my way back line. So I did have a good amount of line back out there. Gets nailed. And it just keeps going and going and going. And all of a sudden it turns. I see behind me, I see this huge tail fin come out of the water. The fish turned like perpendicular, right?
Yeah.
Dan, from 250 feet away, this tail was legit this big. All right, I'm telling you. And it was my old Penn 975 international bait caster. And the one thing I hated about that reel was it was slow. It was really slow. And that fish turned and then started swimming to the boat after it did that whole hoopla thing, just splashing out in the back. And the hook just fell out. That was it. That's my story.
Yeah.
But I screamed the F word incredibly loud because
Yeah, I've heard you do that a few times.
Yeah, on the Mako, the first Mako.
Yeah.
And a few minutes later, I get a call from Scott McGuire, and I just pick it up, and he goes, "How big was it?" And I'm looking around me. I can't see another boat. I'm like, "Scott, it was absolutely enormous." And I go, "Where are you?" He goes, "I'm about a mile north of you on the beach." He goes, "I can hear you." Can hear you scream. I'm like, "Yeah, it was a big one." But that was the first time, probably the only time I actually saw the backing on my line. And that was a full spool too. That was out
30
there
pound?
good. 30-pound braid, yeah,
Wow.
I believe. Yeah, it was a while ago, but that's generally what I fish. So yeah, there's my big fish, one of the big fish stories we lost, but that was probably the biggest striper I've ever hooked.
No shit.
Yeah, I've caught a few 49, 48 pounds, 50, 52 inches, I think was my longest. Yeah, something like that. That one was bigger. I mean, that tail, I'll just never forget the size of that tail, Dan. It haunts me.
Yeah, I've only 40 pounds probably is the biggest, like unofficial weighing, but 46 inches, that's the biggest fish.
Yeah.
It's
a huge fish, man.
It's a huge fish, but I know there's bigger ones out there.
Oh, there certainly is. That's why we keep doing this.
Yep. But then it's like, there's nothing like, oh, this is definitely a 40 pounder. And then it's like 36 and a half.
Well, sometimes, man, those high 30s inch fish really fight.
Yeah.
Like they really, really, really fight.
That was so funny that day. Oh, the day we were, we were catching all the fish there.
This year, yeah.
Catching all the fish there every day. I'm like trying to give something without giving too much. And then, so we get the one fish to the boat. It ended up being like 43 inches. But I was just like, this fish was massive. And Chris, the best is used to go, the thing's a fucking bazooka. So like the rest of the season, I'm like, the thing's a bazooka.
A bazooka. That was a fun day.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That never materialized again this past year or two.
Yeah,
huh?
no, it didn't.
Yeah, that was a good little bite.
Maybe we should talk about what we did there a little later on.
Well, it was snagging and dropping. It was just snagging.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this past season. This past season, when we were, we had a day that we were trolling, and the water was super calm, and then we ended up getting a bunch of.
Was it that day? That was. All right, I was thinking of another fish. Yeah, I was thinking another one. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this is perfect because this kind of went with what we were starting off today with, talking about switching it up.
Yep.
I had a day off from chartering. Fishing had been good. Like it'd been no problem, but I had a morning off. Somebody canceled last minute, so. I called Dan and said, "Hey, you want to get out there and just go mess around?"
Yeah. So, like, the thing with this particular day and this particular time of year, and actually the whole season, really, like,
this season was a weird one.
Absolutely plenty of mackerel around, but, like, the searching of the mackerel on certain days was just like, where the hell are these things?
It was just so frustrating.
Yeah, it became a little frustrating. And, as the time creeps on a little bit, when you're trying to find bait and it's creeping into your fishing time, it's like, oh, man. So I'll never forget what we did was, and something that probably a lot of fishermen do, but I hadn't really done in the past, was when you finally find the mackerel, when you're catching them, why not send one out on a balloon and see what happens, right? So I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. So it's kind of an old technique that we used to do. I grew up doing in the last, I don't know, decade since I started chartering. We really didn't do it, like here and there if we saw some signs. But it was just, we were in that pattern where we'd be getting mackerel. It seemed like every day we'd pull up to a spot, get 2 full strings right off the bat. And then it would be a struggle for 10, 15 minutes. And, sometimes you get another wave in, sometimes you wouldn't. And then I'd start maybe marking a striper on my screen, or I'd see some swirls, so it's like, all right, there's some fish hanging around here in the mackerel schools. And so that was kind of the day. I think it might have been early July, late June, somewhere in that frame.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it was relatively early in the season. So me and Dan were out, we were catching mackerel, and we threw one on a balloon, caught a nice fish, and we're like, all right, let's hang around here. And we started trolling around just this random area. And I don't know, we got 7 or 8 fish over 40 inches, and we were in by 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah, like at the dock back at 9.
Yeah. Like never in a million years did I ever think I would fish there. It was just kind of like, we'll give it a shot, see what happens. It was like, yeah.
Yeah. And I fished that way for about 2 more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, for about 2 more weeks I fished that way. And then it kind of solved my mackerel problem too. Because, we ended up trolling. So when you're trolling, it's not like when you drift in the mouth when, a lot of mackerel die, they fall off. There's a lot of schoolies picking them off. You catch a lot of schoolies and a lot of fish as well. But like when you're trolling in that type of fashion, it's not crazy action. So I just needed enough mackerel to get me started. So now we were going out there getting, our typical 3 strings right off the bat, our 15 mackerel.
Yep.
And instead of sitting there for a half an hour or moving all over the place, we were just setting out a 4-rod spread for stripers. And then I would actually troll a sabiki, and we would pick up mackerel as we were striper fishing. And it was crazy when the mackerel would hit the sabiki, almost like half the time a striper rod would go off. So, we'd move around, the mackerel would hit, we'd let them dangle, fill up the sabiki, just, 15 feet, 20 feet behind the boat. And then before you know it, a striper rod or 2 would go off. So I think even those mackerel messed up kind of triggered the stripers that were pushing them around to come to our baits. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about ways later to our members about how we were trolling these. We'll get into more detail about that.
Yeah, because when you troll, you definitely want to make it as effective as possible. I mean, you're burning gasoline to make it happen, right?
Well, I'm burning electricity with my trolling motor.
This is true.
But like that was just an example of, trying to do something different, see what the situations is giving you. Sometimes there is no rhyme or reason to do what you're doing. Ours was mackerel were getting pushed around. They were getting pushed around by life. A couple of guys next to us started doing it, and they were catching tuna.
Yeah.
They'd be doing it all day. But
and then it was, hey, I caught a nice fish. There's probably more here.
Yeah.
Let's do something different.
Yeah. And then, we also tried some new techniques this year. The big one for me, which is, kind of caught on in other locales, and I gave it a shot up here, was the jigging spoon. It was fantastic.
Oh, yeah. That was a super, super awesome lure. It still is. I'm going to be using it a lot next year. Catches everything. Catches bass.
Remember how many mackerel we were in the mouth? Awesome. We were drifting the mouth for stripers.
Right,
we were
take
slamming mackerel. Those were our first mackerel of the year, if I remember correctly. Oh. Yeah. Fallon and Tyler not snagged, but hooked the tuna on it while they were fishing with them.
Mm-hmm. Catches sturgeon.
Sturgeon. I landed my first sturgeon on it, incidentally. No, but again, we were just trying to think about, all right, what if there's a situation where, maybe one day you can't get mackerel? That's really why I got it. Like, would this thing be effective, in a drift situation where I don't have bait? Luckily we never had to get to that situation. But hell yeah, man, it was definitely more than good enough. Probably not as good as live bait, but we got some really nice fish on those spoons consistently.
Absolutely.
Consistently. And in all different places. In the river, in the ocean front. It was awesome for bluefish. We'd be trolling for bluefish. If we're still over the pile, we'd bump it in neutral and drop the spoons down.
Yep.
And double and triple up.
Yeah, the bluefish just destroy everything, though. They got scratching.
That's right. We had a pretty good bluefish here this year too.
Yeah, no, we did.
They were consistent. They weren't all over the place like the year before. They were like in one general or 2 general areas. For
it was wicked funny that the day that everyone realized that they were there, and we were all on the beachfront trolling around and catching them.
Yeah.
And then I went to look on my news feed, and there was some lady that had put up a photo of all the boats. She was like, "Is there some kind of like fishing derby going on today or something?" Everybody was out there.
Oh, it's so funny. Everybody bitches about bluefish until they're in, and then it's bumper boats out there.
Yep.
Yeah. So there were, yeah, it was good.
There were some good sized snappers though. Like there were some big ones.
Dude, there were some big boys. We got quite a few over 35 inches or so.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
Break the Wade Boggs record.
Yeah. What's the Wade Boggs? Yeah, he's got the record.
It's some
mass
type
record, I
of
think.
line class. It's like, I forget what it is exactly. I should probably research it while we're talking, but it's definitely breakable. I just think that no one's just registered the fish.
Now, I don't know if this is true, but there's a rumor around that Wade Boggs has another record, not a fishing related record. Do you know what it is?
No.
Have you ever heard of it?
I know that he had one time drank like a 30-pack on a plane.
No, it was 100 beers.
Oh, it was
Supposedly,
Yeah.
it was 100 beers on a flight.
Yeah.
If you guys watch Always Sunny, they try to duplicate it. It was a good episode.
Oh my God, roll me! I would die.
Ugh.
100 beers.
Well, I don't think I drank 100 beers this year.
Yeah. I might have broke 100. Who knows?
But yeah. So, what are some other things like this year for us? You know, a staple in our area is the river. The river fishes well generally all season long.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, other than a few pockets here and there, we weren't fishing the Merrimack often.
Yeah, I mean,
often at all.
Yeah, I mean, early schooly season, and then that was really, I mean, there was a few bites that happened.
Yeah,
but not aggressively fishing in the river. It feels like the fish just screwed all the way to the dam.
Yeah, well, they would have dropped back at some point, and I think I almost think because at the time of year when they drop out of the river, when they follow the herring back to the ocean, here's my theory on this: why they weren't around. We did have some pogies in all through June through early July, and I think those fish when they were exiting the river, those pogies were right around the mouth at that time.
Yeah,
and I think those fish followed and pushed those pogies north and every day they kept getting more and more north, more and more north, more and more north, until they were kind of just out of our area where I wanted to go on a daily basis. And I followed them north all the way up to mid New Hampshire coast a couple times and did pretty well. But it's a long run for a 4-hour trip for sure.
Yeah,
and but I think that's what happened. I don't know. So, and there was still fish in the river. Like there were days I'd come back and I'd mark a bunch and we'd get some. But like things like, your productive areas like the flats were pretty weak this year overall.
Yeah,
from
comparing.
Comparing. I'm sure some of you guys had some luck out there. I wonder why it was. I mean, the year before it rained every day. This summer it didn't rain at all.
Yeah.
So maybe
we did have one fantastic night though.
We did have one great night.
Awesome.
Also with a new tactic that we tried,
Yep.
the one that we're going to talk about later.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was Jim Morbido still talks about that night evening. That was fun. If it wasn't for the
that kind of
bugs.
fishing is just amazing, right? It's like towards the end of the day, the sting of the sun is gone. The water is just calm.
Yeah.
It was a weekday, so there was no one on the water. Just like you're all alone. You just hear like the breeze and the boat just clapping up again. It's like the whole scenario is just amazing.
The whole scene. The whole scene is what you live for. And then when the fish are biting like they were, that just really pulls it all together.
Oh, yeah.
That just really is like one of those memorable times out in the water.
Yep, for sure.
And then, so we got, what other cool things? Oh, let's talk about the biggest curveball that got thrown into the year this year. The football tuna decided to show up close to shore again.
Yeah.
Oh, that was amazing.
That was amazing. And for the sake of, I don't even know, I'll just say it. I was less than 3 miles off the shore and caught a school tuna.
Yeah. First one on your boat by yourself, right?
Exactly. Yeah. First one on my boat.
Yep. Were you solo or did you have someone on the boat?
No, I had Derek with me.
You were solo.
Yeah, I was basically solo. And it was actually funny. So like at first I was like, am I going to give Derek the rod? Am I going to give him the rod? And then we hooked the fish and I'm like, I'm not taking the fucking rod. So I reeled it in and then Derek's adrenaline's pumping. And there was so much gear around. It was like, oh my God, this could end up being a nightmare.
Oh, like lobster gear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And The fish luckily just kind of stayed straight. It wasn't going around the boat at all, but it had a few runs, and it was just out and in, out and in, out and in, and so it was easy to keep in control. And Derek, was basically keeping he was at the helm, making sure the boat was doing what we needed it to. And then it was funny because I was like, all right, get the gaff. Like, I see it. Like, here it comes. And he went to gaff it. And I have the cutting board in the rod holder. And I'm like, Derek, like, gaff it. Like, it was like he hesitated to gaff it. And when he finally gaffed it, he leaned over the cutting board. And thank God it released because he would have broke it. And, like, it fell down.
Oh, Jesus.
But then he hooked the fish and he brings it up. Dude, the gaff was literally in its eyeball. Like right behind its eyeball. I was like, wow, that was actually really impressive
Perfect
for
shot.
someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
He probably closed his eyes and just swung.
Yeah, I know. But that was really cool. And then on the way into, there was some jumping around, and like there seemed to be just a little bit of everywhere. It's kind of like Blitzkrieg. They come in and they're freaking everywhere, and then they're gone.
Yeah, and it was just really great to have the opportunity. And the great thing was too is like, I used to do that kind of fishing all the time, like a decade ago, and then they kind of went away. So we've had some like that schoolie tuna gear just collecting dust, and the game has changed. So one of the things when I go down fishing down at the Cape, they came out with those wide tracker spreader bars, so you don't need outriggers.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't have those back when I was fishing, so we never really pulled bars. When you pull spreader bars, typically you want outriggers to get the bar out of the water so you have a good-looking presentation, so it looks like little squid or schools of bait fish. But what these bars, these wide trackers, they had little birds that would plane out to the side and get out of your wake into clean water. And it was a huge advantage for being on a small boat. And I had success with them down the Cape, and I had them at my house, and it was like, oh, all right, let's fire these up. And they worked fantastic. They worked unbelievable. And because I don't think north of Cape Cod I ever caught a tuna on a bar up here.
Really?
Yeah, all mine were on sluggos and X-Wraps for the most part.
Well, I caught them on a bar 2 miles offshore.
Yeah, there you go. Actually, kind of in the same area where we caught the stripers those days.
Yeah.
Right? They were chasing the bait around.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And
yeah,
then,
I really hope that comes back this year.
I know.
I think it must. I don't know. We'll see. You just never know.
You never know.
Years change.
Every year is so different. I mean, we still had a fantastic year inshore the stripers and stuff, but I fished probably further away from the mouth than I ever have in either direction.
See, the problem with the tuna, though, is I actually caught less bass in 22 than I did in 21.
Oh, yeah.
Because then focus switches,
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I just want one of these things.
I was begging clients. I'm like, please. And they were just like, oh, I'm bringing my kids. They just want to catch fish.
Yeah.
I'm bringing clients. I'm like, let's go get a tuna.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Because it's not a sure thing. It's not a guarantee.
No, it's not. It really isn't. But it was almost like a 50-50 chance this last year.
Which is good chances. This is good.
But
you know what it's like. You're somebody that goes out fishing and you bring people who don't really get to experience it. It's their first or second time ever being on a boat even.
Yeah, well, you think of it, you're going out for one bite, right?
Exactly. You're going out.
One bite.
One bite's
the rules.
Anything else is an absolute bonus.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, that was definitely a great surprise. The shark fishing this year was awesome. Tons of blue sharks, bigger ones too than kind of had the last few years. The blue sharks overall had been smaller, so we scaled down our tackles. So we were fishing like Shimano Torium 16s for sharks a lot of the time. And this year we started getting ones in the 300 plus pounds more consistently.
Yeah.
Our awesome Mako. That was cool. That ate a tuna.
That ate a tuna.
We're gonna
wait to have Tim on the podcast for that one to discuss that. We need to make it happen.
Yeah, your father-in-law Tim. Was
I actually had a day with Tim and my little cousins out sharking, and when you're shark fishing, first of all, there was a ton of sharks. Like, I think the boys got tired after like 14 or so. I don't even know how many.
A dozen's usually the number of people ringing the bell.
But there was one that like typically, like, is it the pitch bait they're gonna hit, or like you have balloons out there with depths? But the deep one, I had one it was about 60 feet down, and that one went off, and I fought that thing. It felt like a Mack truck. Like, it felt it felt super heavy, like way heavier than anything. And it was the biggest shark in the world. You know why?
Why is that?
Because I didn't fucking catch it.
Totally a thresher, dude.
Yeah, I know.
Totally a thresher.
But dude, the wire leader broke, and like
Really?
yeah, like it snapped, and I was like, how the hell did that happen? Because it's like 180-pound wire, and then I'm just wondering, you know, I used the
wire
scourge of the sea, and it actually busted off. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
I wonder, do you know if it was kinked at all anywhere?
That's what I'm thinking might have happened, because I don't know. I guess I don't know what someone might have done to it before it went in there.
Yeah.
And then it was just out there. So
how long was it? Did you start with a long one, or did you
it was
have like
it was a long one.
like a 8-footer,
Yeah,
10-footer?
It was probably like 6 feet long.
Okay. Do you use wind-ons? You probably didn't, right? Did you ever rig that like a thick, like 400-pound wind-on leader? So what could have happened with that?
Yeah, wait. All right. So I used the wind-on leader, but I don't wind on the leader. I just use a swivel.
Swivel, yeah.
So the swivel is there, and then I do use the corkscrew swivel, and then I use the scourge of the sea, and I tie the bim. What is that called?
Haywire twist.
Haywire twist. And yeah, I thought it would be solid. And what I'm thinking might happen, I do think that maybe the wire was kinked, like it had been kinked and then straightened out again, and that's why it snapped. But I was shocked that it snapped, and I pulled it up. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had that happen on the wire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've definitely had some sharks roll up and bite the leader. Typically a blue shark.
Yeah. Well, those things are like, especially the extra tough ones. Like the extra hard.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you take a hacksaw to cut through those things.
Yeah, I mean,
400-pound ones. It's like unbelievable.
Sometimes too, we'll have a blue shark like wrap up in it, and you just check it, but you'll see him chomping on the mono part of that leader.
Yeah.
But it's still in pretty good condition. It'll just be shaped. Maybe it'll have like a cut like halfway down, so you just cut it and recrimp a new one on. I don't really care if I break off a blue shark at the boat or something like that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't think
that's what I mean. Like odds are that's what you're gonna catch. So like, I mean, it's not like you're tuna fishing where you're inspecting every inch of that line before it goes in the water.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's kind of like, let's just get it out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
So that probably was a tuna. Who knows? Because
I've hooked 3 tuna on steel.
Really? Yeah. So the very next day, there were a bunch of people catching tuna where I was. So who knows? But I'm just gonna go with it was the biggest shark in the sea.
Yeah, if it felt heavy, it might have been a thresher or a mako. Maybe it was but again,
it wasn't coming up.
I don't think
what I mean?
I don't think the type of break off you had dictated what kind of fish it was, but the fact that it was really heavy.
Well, just the way the fight was, it was super, super heavy, and I'd gain on it, and then it would go back down. Super heavy, gain on it, and it would go back down. It wasn't like, so that's why I didn't really think it was a tuna, because it would probably go out, or it would probably, it would just go like wherever the hell it wanted to. And who knows? It probably was just a big blue, because I think a mako probably would have ran out and did some jumping. But the thing just kept going down. It's like, damn, why does this thing keep going down? And you know how I fish with sharks. Like I will like turn the heat on.
Yeah, yeah, high
I
drag.
make them my bitch. Like,
Pop them, stop them.
Yeah. So yeah, it was very interesting, because I had a lot of drag on that reel and it was still pulling.
Well, what's really interesting is that there was a lot of tuna around there too. When I shark fish, I try to stay away from the tuna. Well, I will stay away from the tuna fleet. More so because for a couple of reasons. When I'm shark fishing, targeting them, I want to be away from everybody.
Yeah. I
want to be the only game in town of sharks coming up my chum slick. And the other thing is too, those guys are commercial fishing, and I'm drifting. They're anchored. It's just not good looks. So
yeah, it was actually funny that one of the trips too. I had the slick was, I had a slick probably about 2 miles long at this point.
Yeah,
and then one of the Eastman's boats just comes up right in the slick, probably about a half a mile away, and they were like haddock fishing. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be fun. I can only imagine how many sharks are coming up the slick right now. Someone on that boat had to have caught a shark that day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The same exact thing happened to me last year. They were like 50 yards off my stern. I'm like, good luck, pal.
Yeah, exactly.
Have fun with that. They didn't stay too long. And we were just like one after another at that point. I was actually a little upset at first because I'm like, it's breaking my slick,
Yeah.
But what's he going to do?
Yeah. You got to share the ocean, unfortunately.
It didn't really seem to matter. I think he almost probably pushed the ones towards the end of my slick back up to the boat, because then we just started absolutely whaling them.
Yeah, croaking them.
Yeah. So yeah, and then the fall run was pretty cool out in front of the beach. that's when my electronics are really coming in, driving down the beach, if those days you don't have birds going.
Yep.
And just being able to go 20 miles an hour and read your bottom.
Well, that's what it was.
Accurate.
Like this fall, I really feel was all about the electronics. Because
Yeah.
if you didn't have something adequate on your boat to find the fish, like they were like big huddles, and you go to the usual spots and they're not there. And then it's like, all right, well, where are they? And then you got to motor around, you got to change depths, you got to figure out where they are, and then when you find them, you're on them and you can stay with them.
Yeah, and especially in the fall too. Like when I get an opportunity to fish in the fall because I'm back at school, the daylight on each side is a lot shorter, right? So in the fall, I'm fishing artificials pretty much, when I'm fun fishing. So I don't have time to go out and get mackerel and go to a spot where I think they are and test it out and fail and keep kind of moving. So I would just pull out and just drive zigzag around, look for any type of bait, any type of water clarity, or reading the water for any rips, and just putt around, and being able to, like I said, go 20, 25 miles an hour and see something on my sonar, pull back, loop back around on it, and there's the buffet. I drop the spoons down. Once I drifted out of it, I'd fish the sluggos a little bit.
Yeah.
And then just kind of follow along the path, find out what contour line they're running, what structure they're relating to, and you can get that data quick. And you know what? I'm probably going to start doing that more, even live bait fishing now, with how much success we're able to find doing it that way.
Sure.
So yeah,
fishing's amazing, man. It's like you're forever learning, forever changing. Everything's evolving, everything's getting a little bit better. But then with your experience on the water and keeping your logs and seeing what works one year, what doesn't work another, the more you master the craft, it's just the more you appreciate it. And I can't friggin' wait to be on the water again.
I cannot wait to get back out, man. I think it's that time of year, man. The phone's been ringing off the hook. All of a sudden, people are booking trips. You were talking on the phone like we're going nuts. We're getting antsy for this.
February's almost here, so. Ooh.
Yeah, big show season coming up. We got boat show. We got the Plum Island Surfcasters. We got Rissa. We got the...
And shout out to Vinny Scatino, because I am definitely going to wear my cowboy hat down to Rissa, so it's going to be funny.
You're going by yourself this year then, Dan. And then we got...
I might just start wearing it on the podcast now that we're on film.
And then we got our show, the Mouths of the Merrimack show in Newburyport, April 29th. So that will be good.
That's exciting.
Really excited for that one. We got a couple cool booths coming. For those of you that don't know, we're running we call it fishing trade show. Local shops, local captains, local people trying to sell off some of their used gear. Shops trying to give you some good deals and some new products. We have raffles. It's a great time. It's a lot of fun.
It really is. It's an awesome place to get some discounted stuff, maybe some secondhand stuff, maybe some new stuff. But also if you have a bunch of stuff lying around and you want to sell it, I would reach out to us quickly to reserve a table of your own. Yeah,
check out our website. If you go to mouthsofthemerrimack.com and you click on the events tab, you'll see the information there for our fishing fair or fishing trade market. And if you're interested in the table, you can sign up right through there on PayPal. I think we're going to have probably room for about 36 to 38 tables this year. So, like I said, we got vendors that have been doing it for a long time. For those of you that are in the area, it used to be the old Northeast Charter Boat Captains Association flea market. But we're trying to amp it up, get some more local businesses to get some higher quality gear. And we did a little bit last year. We're going to have a little bit more this year. So really excited about that.
Awesome.
All right. So
I think that you and I should be telling some secrets for our members. So we're going to keep this going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in my brain, that fishing trip. There's a lot more we have to talk about technique-wise.
There's a lot of techniques. So for Mouths of the Merrimack members, all right, if you want to go on our website, we're going to post the second part of this podcast. We're going to go into a deep dive about a tactic that we tried out this year, and we had a lot of data from 4 or 5 of us. And it's very, very successful, very fun, and very unique. So go to mouthsofthemerrimack.com. In the private section, you'll see the video. If you're not a member, click on it. Sign up. $7 a month. You get an extra podcast a week. You get all kinds of raffles and fun things. A private forum where we can go into even more detail. I mean, a lot of our members have been calling me, texting us, and talking through the forum what type of rods and reels they should buy, what type of aspects they look for a boat, fishing reports, things like that. So come on down. And if you're watching this video on YouTube right now, please click the mouse of the Merrimack symbol over here in the corner to subscribe and check out one of our other podcasts over there. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for tuning in.
Tight lines.